go. Okay, did everyone have fun building stuff for themselves? Did you try at least to build a couple? Just a folder, simple index file. So today I'm going to actually go into the gory details behind what actually makes up an HTML document. We're going to go step by step through it, and in traditional programming fashion, I'm going to give you another assignment to do. Because, you know, there's no way to learn this other than to actually do it. So we're going to start by taking a look at what is the actual structure of an HTML document. How does it all fit together? Now, when we put those documents together, we're creating literally a document. When you type in a URL in your browser, you're making a request to a web server. That request is to say, hey, go get me a page. When the web server gives you that page back, it's giving you an HTML page, and the browser has to do something with it. What we understand about how we write our web pages will dictate what the browser shows on the screen. So what we're really going to get into here is, how does the browser interpret the things it gets back from the server? In most programming environments, all of the software we write is written in an English-like language, and that is some what we call higher level language that is probably looks pretty cryptic to most people who haven't done a lot of programming. But compared to what the machine really uses, it's really very close to natural language. There's a big exception. The exception is that in all natural languages, whether you speak Spanish or English or French or Cantonese or Mandarin, all natural languages leave a little bit of ambiguity, a little bit of, did they mean this or did they mean that? And when we're working with the computer, there can't be any ambiguity. So the languages we've devised to help us manipulate the computer are all designed to be completely unambiguous. There is only one way to interpret them. And if there's only one way to interpret them, then we can get a pretty good idea that the way we interpret things is going to be the way the browser, the way our environment is going to interpret them. So for today, what we're going to look at is, what are the kind of languages that make up what you see in a web page? Well, there are three main components to every web page, and we divide them up to make sure that it's easier for us to maintain in the long run. Now, the first one we started looking at the other day, and that's HTML, or specifically HTML5. This is the markup language. This is the language that allows us to have some sort of structure or scaffolding to hang everything else off of. It's relatively static. It consists of a number of tags, and we'll get into the details behind them. The idea of HTML is to create a basic framework that the browser can interpret, that everything else can be attached to. The second language we'll talk about is CSS3. And CSS3 is all about the styling or the look and feel of the page you're about to look at. So we take that look and feel stuff away from the structure. What that means is, when we build our structure, we can change the way it looks by simply changing the CSS without having to redo all of the HTML. And from a development perspective, that makes us a little bit more efficient. We can take pieces that we've done before and reuse them, knowing that they don't have anything to do with what it looks like. The usual analogy I use for this is like when you're designing and building a house. The HTML is the structure and the framework, the framing, the 2x4s. Where do the doors go? Where do the windows go? Where do the walls go? How thick are the walls? The CSS is like the paint, the colors on the trim, what kind of flooring, what kind of lighting are you putting in there? They're all the embellishments and all of the things that make it look nice. When we're talking about building our document, we're going to work with the HTML first. And then the last piece I have here is technically called ECMA script. And that's the JavaScript part. Now, the name JavaScript came about kind of by accident, kind of by marketing. So you hear it talked about a lot. JavaScript is probably the most maligned language on the internet. And it is so because there's so many people building web pages and web applications out there that a lot of people seem to have opinions about how this software should be written. In next term, we have an entire course on JavaScript, and we can show you how to build interactive parts of your site or your application in a nice, clean way that makes it easy to extend. So we're not going to touch on JavaScript this term. Now, how do those things all fit together? Well, first of all, we have to write some source. We have to write some HTML page that is the basic structure of scaffolding that we're going to put together. And that HTML page lives in a file folder in a place that's accessible by a web server. On your computer, the way we see that is twofold. The first way, and the simplest way, is your computer has files with the extension .html connected to your browser. That way, when you double-click a file with an HTML extension, Microsoft Windows goes and looks, hey, what program is associated with that? Oh, Chrome is associated with that. Let's launch Chrome with that HTML page. Now, that's the easiest way to do it. There are other ways to do it. You can install tools on your computer. Specifically, you can install a JavaScript environment on your computer. I'm not going to walk you through doing this. We don't need to do it for this class. If you're inclined, you can install a tool called Node.js. That's all one word. And Node.js is a JavaScript engine. It hasn't got a Windows interface. It works on the Mac, it works on the PC, it works on Linux, and it is nothing more than a JavaScript interpreter. And what does that help you with? Well, there's a whole ecosystem out there of people who have created JavaScript programs that run in Node.js. And one of the most popular kinds of programs that people write are web servers. That is, development or test servers you can run on your local computer without having to have a network, without having to have the whole infrastructure of some web server. And some of these are clever enough that they refresh live. That is, every time you edit your HTML file, they automatically update the browser. Now, some of those are convenient to use. And maybe partway through this term, if you think that would be helpful for you, I will walk you through setting those up. Those are all things that are pre-installed on the VFS computers, and you can install fairly easily at home for yourself. It's a nice environment to work in. What do we actually create? Well, as programmers, as editors, as authors, what we create are a collection of files. Now, files are made out of two or more different things. In specific terms, we make text files. Text files are files you can open with the editor or with Notepad, and if you just try and print them out, they have no formatting information whatsoever in them. This is not a word processing document. This is not a special binary file format. This is something that you can look at on any computer in any number of programs, and if you list it on the command line with either the type command or with the cat command on the Macintoshes, you will see the text exactly as you wrote it. We're using Visual Studio Code as our text editor in our integrated environment. You're going to need to start that up. You're going to need to run that today. And in a bit, I'm going to fire up the live server again so you can see what I'm doing as well. A couple key things. The files themselves will not contain the tab character. And I want to distinguish this from you shouldn't use a tab. So the tab key on your keyboard generates a character. that character, a single character, your individual programs like Notepad or Visual Studio Code interpret that as a certain number of spaces. Now, because every different program can interpret it differently, we make sure that our editors don't try and translate them for us. Instead, we make the editors convert them right away. Now, there's nothing you have to do here other than be aware of it. If you see something looks really weirdly formatted, it's probably because there's a bunch of tab characters in it. Our Visual Studio Code editor converts tab characters into 4 spaces. And we're really anal about the way we format this stuff because the way we interpret or look at it as humans is largely dictated by how it's formatted on the page. Editors like Visual Studio Code can use color as well as the indentation to help give us a nice clear view of what we're doing. I'm going to show you a difference between an ugly format and a normal kind of format. We're going to do some stuff. So we want to make sure that we're writing nice text files. We're going to use a code editor. We're going to make sure we format it nicely. And above all, we want you to be consistent. Remember, you're the one who's going to have to come back and maintain this 6 months from now. Or you're the one who's going to have to look at it 4 months from now and go, what the heck did I do? I have a new assignment. I know we did this thing. I can remember it, but I don't remember exactly how to do it. So let me go look at the examples and assignments I did 4 months ago. You better be able to figure out what you did yourself. When we're building our applications, we're going to build a bunch of statements. Those statements are going to be arranged in the file top to bottom, and that's the order in which the browser is going to interpret them. It's going to read one line at a time, and as it reads each line, it's going to do something. Right? Now, the specific structure that we use, the tags that we use, are the things that are going to tell it what to do. And from time to time, we're going to have a very complicated collection of these tags. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some indentation, what we call blocks, to identify chunks of code. They're just visual tabbed in areas so that when your eye looks at an HTML page, you kind of get the structure of the page. And you'll see how that fits together as we build things. The other thing we need to remember is that the browser is going to interpret what we write, which means any extra white space or tabs or extra space characters we put in the formatting are there just for us reading the code. The browser is going to ignore them. So we can take advantage of that, and we can use this kind of spacing and tabbing to make blocks that are easily understandable. If you had a header section and a main section and a footer section, you might indent those 3 blocks separately in the actual HTML file and put a couple blank lines between each one so that you can see that, oh, that's the header part, that's the main part, that's the footer part. So we can use the fact that the browser doesn't really pay attention to those characters to our advantage. When we're working with the web, we also don't want to break the internet. And what that means to most of us is that when your HTML page gets interpreted by the browser makes some guesses and assumptions. It doesn't want to break the internet, so for the most part, a lot of errors are ignored. That means you might have a ton of errors in your file, but the browser won't tell you about that. It'll still look okay. Sometimes you won't see anything at all. So if the errors are too severe, the browser can't guess at what you were attempting. Some of the things the browser will make intelligent guesses at, and sometimes they will guess wrong. In all cases, learning how to do the HTML parts of our document correctly means we take the guesswork out of the browser. We make sure that the browser isn't guessing at what to do, we're telling it explicitly what to do. No ambiguity. Okay? And that's the only way to get exactly what you want. Let's create a little test app just to get our feet wet again, let's get back into Visual Studio Code. So if you start up Visual Studio Code, I'll start up the live share and you guys can connect to it again. And I'll put the link in the text channel again. So if it opens up a file called launch.json, you can close that file, little X at the top of the tab. And I'm going to go into the sidebar and create a new folder, second app, because I'm not feeling very creative with names today. Yeah, you can create new files with other names, but the first file that gets loaded always has to be called index. When you're, what was that last bit? Yeah, so right click on the thing and create a new folder. Right. Now, when the browser gets a hold of it, it's going to display it as a page. But whether we call it a page, a site, or an app, it's the same layout. It's the same thing. Right. Inside my second app folder, I'm going to create a new file, and that file is always index.html. Close hello there. Now, if you have a file called launch.json open, you can close it. We don't need it. I called it second app. You can call it whatever you like. Usually what we do is we name the folder what the name of the site or application is. You should make one like this. We're going to make a couple today. There's no kind of, the more you practice doing it, the more comfortable you get making it. Make a new folder, make a new file. It's the way we always start. Make a new folder, name it whatever the application we're going to make is, make a new file. Don't be afraid to do that. If things aren't working, make a new folder, make a new file. Yeah, and the new file is, the first file that we start is always index.html. And in that file, remember we have just a few basic parts. Doc type. That tells the browser this is an HTML document. I'm going to put a comment in, just my name. I'm going to do an HTML tag. I'm going to do a head. I'm going to do a body. Just go in anonymous. It should. You just escape past that, or show me your screen. We'll click past it. Yeah. Yeah, you're just sharing Discord right now. Now, you may also notice in the chat today, my TA David is here as well. Feel free to use the text channel to message David if you're having problems. Yeah, hit escape. There you go. Right. Now remember, the live share is what's on my screen. Yeah. So when you click live share, yeah, that's when you're trying to share your screen. So just go to the text channel in Discord and click on the link that's there and it'll pop up. Yeah, just click that link. There you go. And go continue in web or open Visual Studio Code. Go open Visual Studio Code. Right? Open it. Continue as anonymous. There you go. Hit return. Where it's got your name at the top, hit return. There, now you. Yeah, hit return again. There you go. So remember, that one is me. That one's not yours. If you want to write your own, just follow along what I've done. Just open up a whole new copy of Visual Studio Code. Right? Now, if you want to try it out, you should be able to open it with the browser. And there's a couple ways to do it. The first one is you can right-click on it and go Reveal in File Explorer. Don't do it on my Visual Studio Code. Do it on yours. If you go Reveal with File Explorer, you'll get the Windows File Explorer and your index.html will be highlighted, and you can just double-click it and it'll pop up in the browser. And as before, my content is really ugly. It's using the defaults that the browser has. In fact, if you look at my Visual Studio Code, if I add some white space and save it, load it again, you notice the content doesn't change. Does not change at all. The browser ignores all of this. And when I highlight it with the mouse, you'll see a bunch of dots there. Those are showing you the individual characters. The little hidden gray dot when you highlight it shows you that it's an individual space character. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go the next step when we're going to build a whole new application. And this time, we're going to design and do something that's actually interesting as opposed to just doing a little simple text on the screen here. So, we go back to my slides here. We're going to start working on the single page. And what does the browser actually do? Well, it's kind of complicated what it's doing. There's a diagram here that will identify exactly what it's doing. And without getting into too much depth, when it gets a page from the internet, your browser is that giant black box. Now, what's going on inside the black box? If we look inside, it's got some networking stuff, and that's the stuff that allows it to connect to a web server. It's got a part in there called get and post handlers, and that part is all about how to figure out how to talk with that web server. And we don't have to interact with that at all. What comes back from the web server gets broken into two halves. One half goes to what we call the parse and build DOM part. The other part goes to the JavaScript interpreter. The part we're interested in is what do we parse and build the DOM. Well, parsing means for the computer to look through the text file it got and to read it one line at a time and turn it into some sort of structure, some sort of thing we can ask questions of. That thing it builds is technically called the document, or the document object model to be precise. And document object model seems like a really long-winded way to say it's just your HTML page. So we have a shortcut for it because programmers are predominantly lazy. We have a 3-letter acronym for it. Now, you'll see a lot of this kind of stuff when we deal with any technical information. You'll see a lot of TLAs. So the useless trivia of the day is, what does TLA stand for? Any guesses? Think about it a second. What does TLA stand for? You guys need more coffee.
I have no idea.
Stands for 3-letter acronym. That's just the useless trivia of the day. Now, the DOM is a 3-letter acronym. It stands for Document Object Model. And it is the browser's interpretation of your HTML page. That document is the basis that the browser works from. Once it builds that document, it's going to build the structure from your HTML page. It's then going to go through your CSS files, your CSS styles, and it's going to apply those styles to that document. And you can think of that document quite literally the same way you think of a normal paper document. It's the browser's interpretation of your HTML. Now, the two parts above that layout and render part, are what the browser does for you all the time. It looks at that document, and based on that document, it generates a layout graphically, and it renders it or draws it on the screen. If you ever change that document, the layout and render thing gets triggered again. So every time you change the document, it gets relayed out and re-rendered or redrawn. Now, the trick to web applications that we're not going to get into, but you should be aware of, is that what that JavaScript part does is after your document is created, your HTML, and the CSS is applied to it, and it's laid out and drawn on the screen for the first time, the JavaScript can then come along and change the document. And this is how JavaScript makes our web sites interactive. It changes the document after it's been drawn the first time. Of course, every time it changes the document, the browser redraws the page. So you can get some nice application features that way. All right, let's start into what are the tags that we're going to put into our document. The first tag you've seen me use is the HTML tag. Every HTML document starts with that HTML tag. That HTML tag has a beginning and an end, and the browser largely ignores everything after the end. So everything we do has to be between the beginning and the end tags. In fact, as a structure overall, our entire document is going to be a collection of these tags, and the tags will have a beginning and an end to tell the browser when to start, when to finish that. Each of those tags is then written top to bottom in the file, and the browser interprets them in that order. Inside the HTML tag, there's a head tag and a body tag. The head tag is there for us to be able to convey information to the browser, but not stuff that's drawn on the screen. And usually that's in the form of either some special tags that we need to say, hey, this is a mobile device, or here's the way to interpret this particular thing, or here's some styles to load, or here's some fonts to load from somewhere else. It's things we're loading but not necessarily seeing on the screen. And then there's a body tag, and that body tag defines all the things that are laid out and rendered. That body tag is the content that we're going to show. So, when you see me write this, as I have it in Visual Studio Code, it's almost identical to this. Now, there's one other piece in here, and that is those comments. The crazy less than, exclamation, dash, dash, and closed by dash, dash, greater than, that's a comment. And the browser completely ignores those. You can write whatever you want there. They do get transmitted to the website. So, let's use our heads. Don't name names. This isn't the part that you're fixed from your friend. This isn't a stupid part. No profanity. You remember you're going to publish this to the world at some point. What we do put in some of those content is some idea of, hey, what is this area or this section? You'll also notice the indentation, and if you look at the sample in VS Code, one of the things you'll see is I use a lot of indentation so you can see what's going on at a glance. Now, if I take the indentation out, life gets a little more complicated. Much harder to read. This is not good. There's an automatic formatter to help, but it only goes so far. Again, not easy to read. Looks the same on screen, not easy to read. The convention is that every tag that has tags inside it, So our HTML tag has tags inside it. We indent them by hitting the tab key. And sometimes we'll add the extra space around to make it easier to read. Because the browser will show that exactly the same way every time. So use that spacing. Now, has anybody ever used something like Front Page or Adobe XD to build a web page before? Right? And if you have you ever opened it up to see what it looks like? Next time you do, or you're on a school computer and you open up Adobe XD, generate a page that just has Hello World on it. And if it's longer than this, ask yourself why. Why would they do that? Okay. Tools that auto-generate HTML pages generally make the most inefficient HTML possible. They're trying to cover all possible possibilities or permutations. So when we're building these pages, it's often a lot easier to actually write them ourselves. It's less work. Now, the interesting part is not only is Visual Studio Code written in HTML, so is Moodle. All of Moodle is just one giant HTML site. As we said, all these documents have this same basic structure. There's a doc type to tell us it's HTML, there's an HTML tag, there's a head tag, and a body tag. Inside the head tag is special metadata to tell us about this page and to load special things. Inside the body tag is our actual content. Now, our content is made up of tags, and tags always have the same basic format. Each of these tags forms an element. So terminology-wise, the P, or the name of the tag, we refer to as a tag. And the element is the beginning, the end, and the content in the middle. So this is a paragraph tag that uses content goes here as its content. So the entire element is the paragraph element here. Now it's interesting I'm using a paragraph element because for the most part, there aren't a lot of sites that are hand-built to use paragraph tags anymore. Kind of old, right? There's a lot of auto-generated sites that still use paragraphs. And paragraphs have that mentality that your web page is supposed to be thought of as a document. So instead of putting an extra space, you put paragraph tags and it puts a line space between every paragraph. Now, when we start talking about an element, that is the entire thing put together. The opening tag, the closing tag, and the content in the middle. There are literally hundreds of different tags. I'll give you a link in Moodle to the tag reference. It's in a website called W3 Schools, and their HTML reference lists every tag, and it also lists all of the parameters for those tags, and it usually has a demo area where it shows you how to use them and has an interactive part you can test them out. At first, you'll find yourself there a lot. I'll go there in a second to show you what it looks like. When we start looking at individual specific tags, this is a heading tag, and it has some predefined formatting to it. There are 6 levels of heading tags. So you can use them to define some of the headers in your site, some of the titles. This particular heading tag is a level 3 heading tag. The element contains an open, a close, and that header smaller content. Now there are 2 other tags you need, and if you have these 2 other tags, you can build every website you've ever seen. While there are hundreds of tags, they're there to make your life easier, to make it easier to read an HTML page. But they all behave much the same way. So, structure-wise, there are two generic tags, the div or division and the span. And the biggest difference between them is the way that they are laid out by the browser. Think of divisions as boxes. If you design a web page, you're going to design it in terms of boxes. Boxes above other boxes, boxes inside boxes, boxes beside boxes. Every bit of content goes in a box. Most boxes are going to be in some sort of container box. Every box, when it comes to a web page, is a div. All of these divisions or boxes are lined up in an inline fashion or a block level fashion. So divisions are lined up as blocks. By default, what that means is they go from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, stacked one above the other, as if it were a document. A paragraph tag is a special division, but they behave identically. Heading 1 through heading 6 are span tags. They're specialized span tags. Now, span tags go left to right. And the browser has some crazy rules on how it does these things. Divisions top to bottom as blocks. Now, we can change that. We can make the divisions go left to right, top to bottom, but only if the division width is short enough that the next division behind it fits in the width of the browser. And that gets a little bit more confusing. Span tags are inline. They're always one after the other. They're always what we call inline. So you get one, then the other, then the other, as long as there's enough width, and they will wrap. So most of our pages are going to be built out of divisions or block level elements. And we're going to use...
I have a quick question.
Yep.
So divisions are basically going vertically and spans will go horizontally?
Correct. Correct. With a million different exceptions. Right? Normally what you'll see is spans used inside divisions. Right? We'll do a little bit of it. You'll get the idea. And it's all based on the document's flow, or the way that the layout engine is going to work. So if you understand how the browser's layout engine works, you can understand how to manipulate your HTML document to get the look you want. And the way we design these things then is you start by identifying or drawing an image for yourself of what you want your document to look like. What do you want your page to look like? And then you take all of the content you put in your page, all the sample stuff you did in your design, and you start drawing boxes around it. Let's take a look at this a little bit more detail. So, block level elements will always flow top to bottom unless we change the way they're styled. And this is where we start to cross over with CSS. And we're going to talk more about CSS probably next time on Thursday. Okay. So all of the elements that we show you, created by the tags we're going to show you, have a default style to them. And all of these default styles can be changed. And that's where it gets confusing. So you might decide that you have got a whole bunch of divs as block level elements, but you want them to behave like inline elements. So you change some styling on them, and all of a sudden they behave like the other kind. The flow of your document is going to be dictated by how you arrange these boxes and the styles you place on them. So when we start building something more interesting, then you're going to have to figure out how do you arrange things. So when we're looking at some of these tags, recognize that we can do everything with just a div and a span. Right? And that while the H1 tag is a span tag that's specialized to have a bunch of special formatting attached to it, and the paragraph tag is just a div with some special formatting to it, these two examples here will look identical in the browser. There's no difference to the browser on how this fits together. So let's say we're going to build a site about cats. Let's think cats. So what do we want to put into a site on cats? Well, normally we would start with some sort of design. Otherwise, we don't know what we're talking about. And probably this is a place where many people who are comfortable with HTML would just simply dive into the text editor and start writing some new HTML. But I'm going to go like really slow. This is what goes on in our heads. I'm going to see if I can make this work for you. And let's see. I can zoom in a bit. There we go. Okay. Let's go there. So my fancy tablet. So we're going to build a page about cats, let's say. Let's say we're going to have a page. Come on, going too fast. And it's all about cats. And I'm going to have some pictures of cats. And I want to have another one down here. And here's where we get into drawing boxes, right? And I'm probably going to have some text, and I'm going to have some more text. Right. As we go, I start to do more and more. I'm going to decide that this area I want scrolling. Right? And I might decide that this box is going to be a cat image, and then I'm probably going to add some extra stuff here just for organizational purposes, where I'm going to create, come on, this is a separate box as well. And you can start to get the idea that we're going to do boxes inside boxes inside boxes inside boxes. And as we design it, we can even put names on things. So as we're creating and building, we really start from a design. What do we want our page to look like? And then we'd have to go code this in HTML. So let me pull up Visual Studio Code. I'm going to leave that on the lower screen. You can watch my Visual Studio Code. We're going to make a new folder. All about cats. And in there, we're going to make a new file. Index.html. And what do we always have? Doc type. And our name. And hopefully we can learn to spell our name more correctly than I can. And an HTML tag. And inside there, we're going to have a head tag and a body tag. And I'm not going to worry so much about the head right now, but in the body, I'm going to start to implement my different things. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to create a div for every one of those boxes I have in my diagram. So there's the header. And then I have a div, which is that outer main content container. And inside there, I have a div for each individual cat. That's that blue box, light blue box. And that's where I also put, for now, a div cat image here. Content and info. And we start to build those divs the same way we build the boxes.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
The live show's frozen for at least myself.
You can see if you can try and reconnect to it. I'll throw it on the bottom screen in a sec. And I had multiple of these boxes. And after my main content, I have a footer. Now you can play around with that indentation and formatting and white space to make it any way you like. But I use the white space and the indentation to try and make it so that as my eye scans through it, I can see the rough structure that I drew. And except for the most simple, trivial web pages ever, I almost always draw the picture. I find the picture is invaluable. And the more complex it gets, the more annotations I put on the picture before I start typing HTML. Now there's some things in this HTML that are very confusing when you start looking at it. Imagine if my list of cats had 50 cats in it. That would be 50 copies of this. Might be very confusing. So I'm going to need to add some additional information to help me keep the cats straight. Because otherwise I'm just herding cats, and that's not much fun. All right, I'm going to leave the live share running. I can leave the diagram here, and we're going to take a 10-minute break. I do encourage you to get up out of your chair and stretch a little bit. I'll come back at 10 after, and we can start diving into a little bit more detail. Okay? Okay. Now, as we start to come back here. Whoa, boy. What the hell happened, Discord? Sorry about that little glitch. So, when we start looking at that document, I brought up that document in the browser, and it doesn't look at all like my diagram looks. It's completely different. And that's because all we have there are the default tags and the default styles that go with those tags. Which means we're going to have to do something to make this look a little bit better. And sometimes that means we're going to need to do some more work with the tags that we have. We get the idea. If you look at the live share, the basic structure is there, but the way it looks on the screen is not at all what we have in our diagram when we were looking at this screen, right? So instead, we're going to have to add some more knowledge about HTML in order to get us to make this look a little bit closer to what we actually put together here. Now, to do that, we need to get a little bit better at figuring out some of the things we're going to add in HTML. When we're looking at HTML, the basic structure is kind of there, but we're going to need something more. So let's say, for instance, I want to add to my cats page a Google search on more information on cats. So I'm going to introduce to you the anchor tag. Now, anchor tags is a strange name for it, but really what anchor tags are links. Anchor tags are called anchor tags because you can create them so that the link in your document goes to another part of your document. The anchor tag by itself doesn't tell us enough. If I go back to my live share and I go inside the footer and I create that anchor tag, that anchor tag doesn't have enough information for me to be able to go search Google with that. So the way we compensate for that is that every HTML tag has the ability to have additional attributes attached to it. Those attributes are put in the opening tag, and they always come in the same form. That is, they're always represented the same way. There's the name of the attribute, an equal sign, and the value that's assigned to that attribute. In an anchor tag, the attribute we're interested in is the hypertext reference, which we're just writing the short href. The equal sign says what is the reference going to be. In this case, I'm going to google.ca or google.com. And be aware that there's no spaces between the attribute name and the value, and that the value always goes inside double quotes. Okay? So, if we go to our live share, we can add an attribute, and in there, we tell it where to go. The anchor tag has some default formatting and some default behavior. It's going to create this information right here. So more on cats is going to be the label. And when we click on the label, it'll go to google.com. If I look at that in the browser, I can see the label on the end. More on cats. And it's got a link. Now, if I click that link, I'm going to go away from my page and over to google.com, which I don't really want to do right now. Every tag has attributes on it. And some of these attributes are going to help us identify exactly what this thing is. More specifically, when you have very specific regions of your design, you may want to give them IDs. Now, IDs need to be unique within the entire page. But other than that, you can make them anything you want. There's a couple other things you need to know. One, HTML is case insensitive. It doesn't know the difference between uppercase and lowercase. Two, you can't ever use spaces in file names or in tag names or in any other names you choose. Never use spaces in names. Okay? They create all sorts of hazards and problems when things start running. So we have a convention we use, and that is we use hyphens between words, dashes. So I'm going to go through in the live share, and based on the diagram, I'm going to name some things by putting ID attributes into them. So here's my diagram. Over in the live share, I'm going to add that's my header. There's my footer. Here's my main content. There's cat 1. And hopefully now we can start to see a little bit of structure emerge, where you can name things and you can keep it straight in your head what's going on in there. Those IDs will have no effect on what you see on the screen. They just help you stay organized. Okay. Now, there's a couple other attributes that you're going to want to play with. The second attribute that I'm going to introduce to you is the class attribute.
So basically, an ID is a type of attribute?
Yes. So ID is an attribute. On the particular one I'm on, the value of the ID attribute is header. Oops. Forgot the quotes. The syntax highlighting and the coloring should help you not forget quotes and stuff. So, if I'm looking at the live share, and I'm going to put this on the shared screen too.
So for this, like the attribute would be class, and the value of the class is heading class, right?
Correct. Correct. This is an element. Right? That's the tag. That is the attribute ID, and its value is header. Attribute equals value. Here's another attribute and its value. Class equals heading class. Okay. Now I haven't talked about what classes do yet. I'm going to add another one. Now, in here is where I can finally start to adjust what things look like. Okay. And I want to see what's going on. I'm going to throw in some CSS. Don't worry about what the CSS is right now. Just have a look at it. Go back here. You can still see in the live share what's going on. But if I look at my page, I can now see a red box. Zoom in. All right. If I compare this with the diagram I did, oops. That's the header. The main area. The footer. And then the two inner boxes with the cat. And then inside each of these, I have two more boxes. And right now, they'll be lined up like this. Okay? So from the diagram to the HTML page, you can kind of translate those two, which is why we do the indentation the way we do. We can use the different attributes on each individual tag to help us define our HTML page, to help identify different sections, and eventually to help us attach different bits of information or styles to each individual element. And it's when we start attaching the styles that we start to get the look and feel we're looking for. So we want to get the structure there first, and then we're going to work on exactly how do we make this thing look. We can use these things to help us. So in particular, those classes are going to be styling things that we want to reuse. And we're going to talk about that in a second here. Okay. So we'll go back to our diagram for a second. And in order for us to make intelligent use of the diagram and how exactly we can map it into our HTML document, we're going to need to add some more elements and how they fit together. And in order to do that, we're going to need to know a little bit about how we style these things. So you can attach this style attribute that I've got here in the live share to any element you want. Okay? And when you attach that style element, you're attaching different ways to make this look. Let's attach one to the HTML tag because that'll apply to everything and everything inside it. So part of the reason we indent these things, we nest them, is to show a parent-child relationship. Every child inherits all of the styling elements of its parent. So if I go here, I can add some font size. And now when I go back to my page, all about cats, even when I shrink it back down to normal zoom, I can see the text is quite a bit bigger. If I change that to 48, I can see it gets even bigger again. Now you notice everything is kind of a block, top to bottom, left to right. And we're going to want to change the way that behaves from time to time. So I'm going to introduce a new tag for you here. And this tag goes in the head section this time. The first thing we're going to introduce, if you were to see the top edge of my browser, you'd see that the title in the tab bar is just some gobbledygook numbers, the IP address of my local machine, which is not very helpful. So in the head section, we're going to add a new tag called the title tag. And the title tag is, what is the title you want in the tab bar in your browser? So mine's all about cats. When we add that tag in the browser, that's interesting. That's right. Yeah. We can get that into the browser. The other thing we're going to add here is another new tag called the style tag. And the style tag is going to let us connect similar styles with common elements. In other words, a set of styles that we can use everywhere. Let's say I want to put this border on every single thing. I would go ahead and I would try and take this border style and I would create a category of styles. Let's call it border. Now, the semantics here is when we're writing these styles, we're going to add a dot in front of the name of the style, and the name can be anything you want. Make it something like that. And once I make that red border, I'm going to put a style inside it. Now this is a category of styles. I'm going to copy that, paste it here. And although it looks really crazy and I haven't explained how this works yet, I'm going to reuse it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this border red on multiple different divs. And the way I do it is with the class attribute. And when I go back and look at my page, I get all sorts of errors. I get all sorts of errors. Because I don't know what I'm doing. Here we go. That's more what I was expecting. Get my cats there. We've used that border to highlight individual things. Now the fun part when we start separating out the styles is that if I want to change all of the borders, and let's say I want to add a little bit of space around the outside of them, then I can turn around and add that spacing as another style that gets applied. Let's do it this way. And you can see I'm starting to add some extra space around the outside. Let's make it big so you can see it. So now we can see the boxes that we're talking about. So there's a lot of tags to learn. I said I would share the site with you. Yep. Sure. The style, I'm kind of jumping ahead here. I am going to go back and explain those styles, so don't freak out. You're showing me Discord. Okay, I can see what you're doing. Does it not look right? It's definitely an equal sign. It's not a... Like on line 22, that's class equals. Just the blur of the browser. Line 22. Should always be class equals. It's attribute, equal sign, and then value. So make sure all those things, ID equals, class equals, style equals. It's always an equal sign. Don't be afraid to stop us and ask those questions before we get too far ahead. someone else is thinking the same thing. The site I brought up here, if you're ever looking up any and all of the HTML elements, there's a full HTML element reference here. So if we look up, for instance, a div, here's a div. This is the div tag. And they give you a sample, and if you click the try it yourself, you can go play around with it right there, right online. So you can try and break it. Right? There's nothing you can really kill here. But you can see some samples. Here's class equals my div. Right? Now, one of the things here is, you see the way they've written this? Right? This is what I'm talking about with people and examples. So HTML is case insensitive. My div with a capital D is no different than my div with a small d. So you need to make sure that you're using those things always with lowercase letters. And conventionally, we'd just put hyphens in between the words. It's easier to read.
What's the website called?
It's, I'll put the link in Moodle. It's W3 Schools HTML tags is the search you do. And to be honest, even when I'm writing big HTML pages and stuff, I often have this site up in another browser tab off to the side on another monitor. It's the reference manual, right? Whether you're doing this for 6 months or 6 years or 20 years, you don't memorize these things. Don't attempt to memorize all the tags. That's why we wrote them down in a manual, so you don't have to memorize them. It gives you a list of everything that's there and what you use them for. Here's a span. Defines a section in a document. It's very generic. Style. Defines style information for a document. Doesn't necessarily tell you where it goes or how to use it until you click on it and it shows you examples. Goes in the head section. You know, they're really bad formatting here. And if you click try it yourself, you can play around. Wow, this is really bad. Okay. Now again, we're going to talk in the future about how styles really work. But this is the reference manual, just so that you know everything. It's not like I'm going to walk through and show you every tag ever. I'm going to use the ones that are the most common. In fact, there's certain elements that we kind of use over and over again, and those are the common elements that we're going to try. In the head section, it's going to be the title, and then I'm going to come back to this one, but there's a link tag that goes in the head section, but we want to pull styles in from a second file, where we have so many styles that they're really kind of cluttering up our HTML. For now, it's sufficient that if we want to style an individual element, and if you look at the live share, you can see this for a second, you can use the style attribute on any individual element. And that's how we're going to make things look different. If you want to reuse a style, then you'll make a version of it in the style tag and use the class attribute to identify which style from the style tag you want to use. So you can give them whatever names you want. Let's say I want bold fonts. Just because I do it enough, I remember it. And now I want to add bold to all this thing in here. That's not because bold is predefined as anything, it's because bold is defined here. So if we go back to what I was talking about at the top of the class, when the browser loads your HTML, it loads your head section and loads information that it's going to use, but nothing you draw. Then it loads the body section, and it interprets it one line at a time, and it finds every element, and it creates a document. And with that document, it attaches style information to each element. When it finds a class attribute, it goes and searches through here for something that matches. In this particular one, it searches for border-red, which it finds here and applies these styles. Then it searches for bold. It finds it here and adds a font weight. All right. Other elements we're going to connect up. So we can use the heading tags. They have predefined styles. You can also override them. We can use the paragraph tags, although you could just as easily use a division. Typically, we'll use spans if we want to do specific styling on a specific thing. So for instance, if you wanted a word to be italicized or bolded, you would, or underlined, you would wrap it in a span and then attach a class of styles to that span. And in this way, we can build up what our application or what our page looks like. Now, from time to time, our page is also going to contain lists of things. And so there are special tags that make nice lists for us automatically. They can make bulleted lists or numbered lists. Let's go ahead and let's start with a brand new document. And in that brand new document, we're going to talk about some stuff we can play with. Let's say I go back to my editor and I create a new folder. Called the course list. And in there, I'm going to create a new file, index.html. And in there, I'm going to create a doc type. And I'm going to put my name in it. HTML. Here's the body. And in the body, I want to list all of the courses that we might have. So I'm going to create an unordered list. And in that unordered list, that's a bullet list, I'm going to create list items. And other things that we might want to add to a list. Again, this will go back because we don't have any styling information here. We're not going to have anything other than the default styles. But from what we've learned, we probably want to wrap this in a div. and give that div an ID. So we can keep it organized. Sometimes we want these lists to be numbered, so we can make ordered lists as well.
Sorry, one quick question.
Yep.
What's the difference between the ID attribute and like the class attribute?
IDs are unique for each tag or element that you attach them to, and they're used to reference or identify them visually for you.
Okay.
Classes are used to connect styling information that we want to reuse multiple times. Okay, does that help? I'm going to get into more styling stuff next time on Thursday. I guarantee you. Maybe I'm going to make an assignment list, and in here I'm going to do an ordered list. And I use the same list items. If only I could spell. Yep. There is. Do you really want to see that trick? So if you hold down the Alt key with the mouse, so hold down the Alt key on your keyboard, and then you can click on several locations. And now everything I do will happen all those lines simultaneously. And then you just click on an individual line in it and moves the cursor there. Right. Yeah, there's lots of times when we're playing around with some of the quick key shortcuts. So, have an idea what this is going to look like? No. Although I'll show you how to do grids. Let's do that. And go back from all about cats and look at the course list. So looking at the live share, the body has a style attribute, and that equals a font size of 36 pixels. That's the default size for fonts. The course list is a bulleted list, an unordered list. And the assignment list is an ordered list. And we can add some titles in there if we want. like magic, we have lists. And here I'm just using some predefined heading styles. So we can attach style tags to individual elements. If you're wondering, the styles all have a similar format to the attributes, except it's a colon instead of an equal. So it's style name colon value. And they're always terminated with a semicolon. So here, it's not font color, it's just color. Unfortunately, it's the US spelling. So we can change the color. Let's say I want to make all of these list items blue. It seems kind of painful to repeat myself. So this is where we would employ a class. We would go style, and let's make it just called blue. So dot blue, and then I'm going to use color blue. And then for each of these, we're going to add class blue. Let's refresh the browser there. So you notice they all come out blue, even though they're assigning their styles a slightly different way. And if you can see this, you probably also have an idea that, yes, there is a way to make all list items a particular format or a particular style. So those are list items. We have unordered and ordered lists. Whenever you're making a page, you're likely going to run into some lists that you're going to create. Keep in mind that with the right kind of formatting and styling, you could turn a list into a navigation bar or a menu. Because if you change the styling to have an unordered list, and you change the width of every element so that they end up going across the page instead of down, and you change the styling to remove the bullets themselves, then you effectively have a menu system. And if each one of those list items, the contents inside was, say, an anchor, you could have each item in the menu anchor to another page or another site. All right. So there's lots and lots of tags that we can attach to our pages. Some of the common ones you'll see but don't necessarily end up using are paragraphs and breaks. Breaks create forced breaks, so it's like having two paragraphs inside the same paragraph. If you're using divs, you don't really need paragraphs and breaks. You can just have a div with some content inside it. We've got anchors, we've got list items, we've got unordered and ordered lists. All of that is designed to give you the structure. Now, if you learn just that, you have everything to make every web page that's on the internet today. That's it. That's all there is. Everything else is styling. Everything else is how do we make it look good. So I'm going to take a couple minute break here. I'm just going to come back at 5 after 11. And when I come back, we're going to talk about your next assignment. And we're going to give you some time to actually design your next assignment and to kind of digest a little of this and try to figure out how exactly are you going to make this happen. Okay? So 5 after. All right. Let's go to our thing. Covered list items. Okay. One last piece before we start talking about your assignment, because you may need some of these things, and that is just like having places where you might do divisions, and inside those divisions you may also have places where you have lists of things. There are times when you're going to want to present things as a chart or a table, a group of rows and columns of things. Now, this is not a formatting thing. This is really when you have legitimate data that's supposed to be in rows and columns. HTML supports tables. And the tables are built with a table tag. Now, the table tags have some interesting internal structure. They have a collection of rows, and with each row you have data elements. You can also identify which row is the header row. Now, tables do this interesting thing too, where they take a look at all the columns you create in the table, and they figure out the widest thing in any one column, and that's the width of the column. And they try and auto-fit that table to the width of your browser. So if I go back to my course list demo in the live share, and I built a table, I could then build into my table a table heading row and then some table rows. So there's a table with a heading and 3 rows. And in the heading, I can create the heading titles with table data elements. Now, one of the things that we can use some of the white space in our editor to help us with is in the individual rows, before I have data there, I can space them out so that my actual HTML gives me an idea of what this is going to look like. And then I'm going to cheat a little bit. Copy, paste, paste. So there's 3 columns in a table. We can add some styles to the table. Right? And hopefully you'll see the table just comes out with no data in it. What HTML is constantly doing is it's looking at the content between tags, and if there's no content there, it doesn't do anything. It just collapses it down to a 0 width. So if we just put in the alphabet, just as a placeholder. And you'll see it's doing some weird stuff here with the way it's formatted and laid out. We have to futz around with it a little bit to get it to show things the way we want it to. But in the HTML, we look in the live share, we can see that we're structuring it in a way that makes it easy for us to recognize, hey, this is a table, and that table's got rows and columns of data in it. Put those pieces side by side. One of the other things we can do if we're worried about this, and we're going to do a lot more of this next time, but I'm going to introduce it to you today. If you go to your browser and you right click on the background, and I'm going to share, I'm sharing that. I'm going to share my screen so you can see the mouse. So you got me twice. If you right click on the browser, you'll get this pop-up menu. And on the bottom of that pop-up menu is an item called Inspect. Not only does your browser interpret HTML and CSS, and it has full JavaScript engine inside it, it also has a full programming debugger inside it. And if you click Inspect, you can bring that debugger up. I'm going to switch it to the default view, which is it's going to pop up there. And you can move the panels around. And what I'm going to suggest you do is take this bottom panel and just make it really, really small. So this thing's really kind of cool if you're looking at it. If you move your mouse up and down, as you highlight each element, the debugger shows you in your page what your mouse is currently over in the debugger. It should be on this Elements tab, and then you can just look at everything you've built. Now when I look at the unordered list, it shows me the entire list. And the orange part above and below, it's showing me how much space it's taking up. If I click on it, what it shows me on the right side is all the styles that are attached to it. So here, when I click on this list element, on the element it has the color blue. Well, yeah, I said color blue. If I click on this one, it says it's got the blue class that has color blue in it. But it also has all of these other styles in it. Here's the cool part about it. If I just want to see, hey, what would this look like if I made it magenta? I can edit it live. If I want to go down to the table, it will show me the entire table. And what you'll see here is this new T-body tag. This is something the browser interpreted. It guessed that that's what I wanted. All right. And it's got all of these table rows, table headers. So this is helping me go, hey, wait a minute. Instead of just table header, I probably should have a T-body element. So it says I did the HTML wrong. The browser tried to correct it and it guessed wrong. It's not what I meant. So I'm going to go back in the live share and I'm going to change it. And see if that looks any better. And then when I look at my live share here, or the screen I'm sharing, I can see my table has added 2 table body elements. What the? So I can have multiple bodies inside. Now at this point I'm like, well, okay, what's changed in that tag? So is there a separate tag, right, that I need to use there? But it also shows me the current font size. Here I've got the body selected. It says font size 36. I can also use the up and down arrow. Watch what happens when I go up. Now it doesn't save it. It just lets you play around with it. The inspector will do that on any page. Once you know enough about this styling, you can go to any web page. That web page has been loaded onto your computer running in your browser. You can bring this inspector up on any web page. If I go to VFS Study to You, I get this page. I can go to the inspector. And as I look over the inspector, I can see how the page is constructed. Yeah, it's ugly. Yeah, that's okay. Here's the body section. Inside the body, got a bunch of this stuff. Here's a div with the ID skip link, right? And I don't see anything highlighted on the page, so it must be hidden. I've got a header. That's another tag. I've got a div. Here's an ID. And you can see this div top. If you look in the upper left-hand corner here, you look up here, when I highlight that, you'll see it gives me the size of it. It's 682.73 pixels wide and 0 pixels tall. Guess that's why I'm not seeing it. It's 0 pixels tall. Here's the nav buttons. And they're all buried inside this nav menu. I can right-click and inspect any one of those and it takes me right to that element. This is a really sophisticated tool. Don't think you have to learn every bit about it day one, but you should know it exists. And that in the future, we're going to start to use it more and more with our own sites and our own pages to help us develop some of the styling and look of our page more quickly than just editing a text file and refreshing the browser, and edit the text file and refresh the browser. We're going to build the HTML structure in place. Then we're going to bring it up in the inspector and we're going to play with all the styling information until it kind of looks what we want. And then we're going to cut and paste from the inspector over back into our text file. The inspector also tells me that this site has 3 errors in it. If you look at the top of the screen here, it's got 3 errors in it. Hey VFS, what are you doing? Your website has 3 errors in it. How come you're publishing stuff with errors? All right. Assignment-wise, what we're going to do next is talk a little bit about your assignment. So the next assignment I want you to do is I want you to build a biography for yourself. I want you to build a page, a single index.html. And that index.html should talk about you. I know it's one of the fun things everyone likes doing. Right? In the description, it'll tell you we want an image. So we're going to have an IMG tag. to have your image. You can put your image in the same folder if you want. You can attach that image into your document by using that IMG tag. I will show you next time another way to do it. It's a little bit more efficient, and we'll dive into that. I will show you next time on Thursday how to do crazy fonts and stuff, and how to do some styling, because we're going to get into all the CSS styling bits. Okay? But start the same way we did today. A fresh new folder with a fresh new index.html. Start with a diagram for yourself. Start sketching out and designing what you want your layout to look like, what you want your bio to look like. There's some instructions in the assignment. They're kind of like the minimum set of things I'm going to look for. Okay. Don't overcomplicate it. Make sure you've got something to cover each of the items in the assignment list. And then take some time now and start to get an idea of what you'd like to put together as your personal landing page, your personal bio page. All right? So I'm going to hang around here for a bit. I'll leave the live share running so you can look at stuff. And you guys can go and start figuring out how your page is going to work. Okay?
You.
Thanks.